London, February 9. The city exhaled in grey. Fog hung over the cobblestone streets like a hesitant breath. In every direction life moved briskly, umbrellas twisting in the wind, taxis honking with mild fury, and people wrapped in long coats hunched against the cold. It was a Tuesday, but not just any Tuesday. Tucked in a quiet corner between two tall buildings, one a law office, the other a tired bookstore, stood the Inner Light Foundation. Its facade was simple, faded red bricks, a wooden door with iron hinges, and a plaque that bore no grandeur. It didn't need any. People didn't come here for glamour. They came for healing. By 10 a.m. the building already stirred with hushed conversations and the smell of instant coffee. Social workers flipped through files, a kettle steamed in the kitchen. Somewhere a woman wept quietly during a counseling session. At precisely 10:21 a.m., a long black sedan turned slowly into the alley behind the foundation. It parked deliberately, engine ticking in the cool air. Out stepped a man clad in a long navy wool coat, black gloves and a dark fedora pulled low. He moved with the careful grace of someone used to being watched, even when he wasn't. He paused just for a moment before stepping through the back entrance. It was Michael Jackson. But this was not the Michael Jackson of stage lights, moonwalks or gold-trimmed jackets. This was the quiet version, the human version, the man beneath the silhouette. He came alone. No security, no entourage, only a sealed envelope in his gloved hand and a soft, tired look in his eyes. At the reception desk, he didn't say his name. He didn't need to. The woman behind the counter, clearly recognizing him, offered only a respectful nod and took the envelope. "Can I wait somewhere quiet?" he asked. She gestured toward the waiting lounge. "Of course. Take your time." He didn't sit right away. He stood by the window watching raindrops trail down the glass like slow tears. When he finally sat, he folded his hands tightly in his lap, a habit of restraint. 11 minutes later, the front bell rang. The story continues. At 10:34 a.m. the front door opened with a delicate chime. The receptionist looked up, and for the second time that morning she momentarily forgot how to breathe. The woman who stepped inside wore a slate-gray wool coat, the collar pulled high against the morning chill. Her scarf, a pale lavender silk, fluttered as she loosened it. There was something familiar in her posture, composed, poised but weighted by something invisible. It was Diana, not Princess Diana, not the global icon splashed across every tabloid cover, just Diana. The woman who had driven herself here in a modest sedan, who had refused security detail, who insisted on walking through the front door rather than the private entrance. She smiled at the receptionist, that warm, sorrow-tinged smile she had perfected over years of both royal engagements and silent suffering. "I was hoping to see the new wing today," she said quietly, "the one for survivors of domestic abuse." The receptionist hesitated. "Yes, of course, there's someone in the lounge at the moment." "That's all right," Diana replied with grace. "Perhaps I'll just wait a few minutes." She moved past the desk with quiet confidence, pushing open the frosted glass door that led to the small waiting room. As it closed behind her with a faint click, the receptionist sank slightly into her chair, half in disbelief that the two most recognizable people in the world were now sitting in the same room. And yet, there they were. Michael was seated by the window, still looking outside. Diana didn't recognize him immediately. He had lost weight, his hair tucked under his hat, his hands folded neatly in his lap, like a boy in confession. It wasn't until she saw the curve of his profile, the unmistakable poise of someone who carried millions of expectations, that she understood who he was. She chose the seat opposite him, not beside, not too close. There was silence at first, long enough to hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally he turned his head slightly and met her eyes. No gasp, no "oh my God," just mutual recognition. And then unexpectedly he smiled. "Hello," Diana said, her voice soft but steady. Michael gave a slight nod. "Hello." They sat quietly for a moment, the kind of quiet that didn't ask to be filled. Outside, the rain had begun to fall more insistently, tracing patterns on the glass like some invisible artist at work. "You came alone," she observed. Michael turned his gaze toward the floor. "I don't do that often. But today felt necessary." She offered a faint smile. "Necessary is a good word." Diana loosened the scarf around her neck and leaned back in the armchair. "I've funded a few projects here, quietly. I don't even think they know the full extent of it, but I needed to be sure the money was going where it should. Michael looked up. I know what you mean. I donated for the kids' music room, asked them not to tell anyone. It's strange, right? Giving without being or judged, she added. He nodded. Exactly. A long silence settled over them again, not awkward, not forced, just heavy with mutual understanding. You know, Diana said after a while, sometimes I think we become mirrors, reflecting what people want to see, not who we really are. Michael looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time in the conversation, something in his expression shifted. I haven't seen my reflection in years, he said quietly, only versions of it. Diana folded her hands. Their eyes met, and in that moment, without fanfare or headlines or scripted dialogue, two of the most scrutinized people on the planet saw each other, not as royalty or icon, but as survivors of a different kind of war. You write music, she said, that makes the world He shrugged, almost embarrassed. I just try to speak when I'm too scared to talk. I understand that. They paused again. This time it was Diana who broke the stillness. I had tea with a woman here once. She didn't recognize me, said I looked tired and asked if I'd like something warm. It was the most human I'd felt in weeks. Michael smiled. That must have been nice. It was. No cameras, no judgments, just kindness. Their conversation continued, weaving between quiet laughter and long silences, as the rain tapped like applause on the glass. Eventually Diana stood and walked toward the corner of the room where a small bookshelf stood. Most of the titles were worn, their spines cracked from frequent hands, books on healing, biographies, poetry and a few anonymous journals. One in particular caught her eye. It was bound in faded blue linen, the edges fraying. She pulled it from the shelf and brought it back to her seat. What's that? Michael asked gently. A visitor's journal, she said, flipping through its pages. People leave thoughts here. Gratitude, sorrow, confessions. It's private but shared somehow. She handed it to him. Michael hesitated, eyes scanning the first few pages. One note was scrawled in hurried ink. I came here because no one else listened. Another, I found the strength to stay alive. He paused, breath caught in his chest. He took the pen that was tucked into the spine. What will you write, Diana? I don't know yet, he whispered. He leaned forward, shoulders tense, and began to write. His hand trembled slightly. For 5 full minutes, the only sound in the room was the scratch of pen against paper and the rain against the window. When he was done, he closed the journal without a word. Diana didn't ask to read it. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed a hand gently over the cover. I think, she said softly, there's more healing in silence than people understand. Michael nodded. Sometimes I wish I could stay here forever, just be someone else. You don't have to be someone else, she replied. You just have to be. He looked at her then, his eyes glassy but grateful. Thank you. They sat for a long time after that. Words weren't necessary anymore. At some point the receptionist knocked quietly on the glass. They're ready for you both. Michael stood first, adjusting his coat. Diana followed. They walked out together. No photos, no entourage, no witness, just 2 lives, intersecting briefly but meaningfully, in a place the world never saw. Later the staff would swear they never spoke a word to the press, never whispered what happened in that lounge, but they all remembered how the air felt different that day, lighter, warmed by something unspoken, because for once in a world obsessed with watching, no one was looking. Years later, long after both of them had passed, the journal still sat on that bookshelf. It was never moved. It became something sacred, untouched by press, protected by silence. New visitors occasionally ran their fingers across its faded spine, never daring to open it, as if the very act of disturbing those pages might break the spell cast that February morning. But in a private archive, sealed in the basement of the foundation, the staff had preserved a second copy of that journal. One page, in particular, was marked by a faint MJ at the bottom. It read, I am not who they think I am. I'm just a boy who wanted to dance away from pain. If you're reading this, I hope you find your music too, and when you do, don't let the noise drown it. The room where they met was later remodeled into a music therapy space. Children now gather there twice a week, tapping rhythms on hand drums, learning to harmonize their voice. A quiet plaque on the wall reads, in memory of 2 who chose kindness when no one was watching. The foundation never advertised who they were. They didn't need to, because the story passed quietly, from staff member to volunteer, like a legend with no need for proof. One former counselor who had refilled the tea kettle that day, would later say, "I remember the way they looked at each other. It wasn't romantic, not even close, it was understanding, like two lighthouses recognizing each other's signal across a storm, and that's how it ended. Not with a flashbulb or a red carpet, but with a silent conversation, a forgotten room, and two people who simply needed to be seen, no cameras, no witnesses, just the truth, sitting softly between them, like light through rain." Sometimes the greatest stories are the ones nobody tells. They don't trend, they don't make headlines, they live quietly in the corners of the world, passed from heart to heart like whispered songs. This was one of them, a pop icon and a princess, both exhausted by fame, both hungry for something real. What they shared was not about identity or prestige, it was about two souls, weary from public gaze, finding in each other a quiet reflection of their own vulnerability. No one else would know what they said, no transcripts, no records, not even a blurry photo to prove it happened, but it did, and perhaps that's why it mattered. Because in a world so obsessed with proof, likes, shares, screenshots, there's something profoundly human about a memory that exists only in the heart. Years after their deaths, fans still gather online, speculating about whether Diana and Michael ever met, wondering if their paths crossed at some grand gala or charity event. They're looking in the wrong places. The truth was never in the spotlight. It was in the silence, in the slow rhythm of rain on a foundation window, in the curve of a handwritten sentence, in a fleeting smile exchanged by two people who didn't need to explain themselves. They understood, and in that understanding, there was peace. As the world spins on fast, loud, hungry for more, there will always be this story, maybe not written in history books, but etched in something softer, more lasting. In the shared loneliness of two icons, in a journal no one dares open, in the room with no camera.